Hello, this is Morel Benard with the continuation of the story, Wuthering Heights. Last words were, so at present he laid the whole burden of Harrington's faults on the shoulders of the usurper of his property. If the lad swore, he wouldn't correct him, nor however culpable he behaved. It gave Joseph satisfaction, apparently, to watch him go the worst lengths. He allowed that the lad was ruined, that his soul was abandoned to prediction. But then he reflected that Heathcliff must answer for it. Harrington's blood would be required at his hands, and there lay immense consolation in that thought. Joseph had instilled into him a pride of name and of his lineage. He would, had he dared, have fostered hate between him and the present owner of the heights. But his dread of that owner amounted to superstition, and he confined his feelings regarding him to muttered innuendos and private comminations. I don't pretend to be intimately acquainted with the mode of living customary in those days of Wuthering Heights. I only speak from hearsay, for I saw little. The villagers affirmed Mr. Heathcliff was near, and a cruel, hard landlord to his tenants, but the house inside had regained its ancient aspect of comfort under female management, and the scenes of riot common in Hindley's time were not now enacted within its walls. The master was too gloomy to seek companionship with any people, good or bad, and he is yet. This, however, is not making progress with my story. Miss Cathy rejected the peace offering of the terrier and demanded her own dogs, Charlie and Phoenix. They came limping and hanging their heads, and we set out for home, sadly out of sorts, every one of us. I could not wring from my little lady how she had spent the day, except that, as I suppose, the goal of her pilgrimage was Pennystone Crags, and she arrived without adventure to the gate of the farmhouse when Harrington happened to issue forth, attended by some canine followers who attacked her train. They had a smart battle before their owners could separate them. That formed an introduction. Catherine told Harrington who she was and where she was going, and asked him to show her the way, finally beguiling him to accompany her. He opened the mysteries of the fairy cave and 20 other queer places. But being in disgrace, I was not favoured with a description of the interesting objects she saw. I could gather, however, that her guide had been a favourite till she hurt his feelings by addressing him as a servant, and Heathcliff's housekeeper hurt hers by calling him her cousin. Then the language he had held to her rankled in her heart. She who was always love and darling and queen and angel with everybody at the Grange, to be insulted so shockingly by a stranger. She did not comprehend it, and hard work I had to obtain a promise that she would not lay the grievance before her father. I explained how he objected to the whole household at the Heights, and how sorry he would be to find she had been there. But I insisted on the fact that if she revealed my negligence of his orders, he would perhaps be so angry that I should have to leave, and Cathy couldn't bear that prospect. She pledged to her word and kept it for my sake. After all, she was a sweet little girl. A letter, edged with black, announced the day of my master's return. Isabella was dead, and he wrote to bid me get mourning for his daughter and arrange a room and other accommodations for his youthful nephew. Catherine ran wild with joy at the idea of welcoming her father back and indulged most sanguine anticipations of the innumerable excellences of her real cousin. The evening of their expected arrival came. Since early morning, she had been busy ordering her own small affairs, and now attired in her new black frock. Poor thing, her aunt's death impressed her with no definite sorrow. She obliged me by constant worrying to talk with her down through the grounds to meet them. Linton is just 6 months younger than I am, she chattered as we strolled leisurely over the swells and hollows of mossy turf under shadow of the trees. How delightful it will be to have him for a playfellow. Aunt Isabella sent Papa a beautiful lock of his hair. It was lighter than mine, more flaxen, and quite as fine. I have it carefully preserved in a little glass box, and I've often thought what a pleasure it would be to see its owner. Oh, I'm so happy. And Papa, dear, dear Papa. Come, Ellen, let us run. Come, run. She ran and returned and ran again, many times before my sober footsteps reached the gate. And then she seated herself on the grassy bank beside the path and tried to wait patiently. But that was impossible. She couldn't be still a minute. How long they are, she exclaimed. Ah, I see some dust on the road. They are coming. No. When will they be here? May we not go a little way, 1/2 a mile, Ellen? Only just 1/2 a mile. Do say yes. To that clump of birches at the turn. I refused staunchly. At length her suspense was ended. The travelling carriage rolled in sight. Miss Cathy shrieked and stretched out her arms as soon as she caught her father's face looking from the window. He descended, nearly as eager as herself, and a considerable interval elapsed ere they had a thought to spare for any but themselves. While they exchanged caresses, I took a peep in to see after Linton. He was asleep in a corner, wrapped in a warm, fur-lined cloak, as if it had been winter. A pale, delicate, effeminate boy, who might have been taken for my master's younger brother, so strong was the resemblance. But there was a sickly peevishness in his aspect that Edgar Linton never had. The latter saw me looking, and having shaken hands, advised me to close the door and leave him undisturbed, for the journey had fatigued him. Cathy would fain have taken one glance, but her father told her to come, and they walked together up the park, while I hastened before to prepare the servants. Now, darling, said Mr. Linton, addressing his daughter, as they halted at the bottom of the front steps. Your cousin is not so strong or so merry as you are, and he has lost his mother, remember, a very short time since. Therefore, don't expect him to play and run about with you directly, and don't harass him much by talking. Let him be quiet this evening, at least, will you? Yes, Papa, answered Catherine, but I do want to see him, and he hasn't once looked out. The carriage stopped, and the sleeper, being roused, was lifted to the ground by his uncle. This is your cousin, Cathy, Linton, he said, putting their little hands together. She's fond of you already, and mind you don't grieve her by crying tonight. Try to be cheerful now. The travelling is at an end, and you have nothing to do but rest and amuse yourself as you please. Let me go to bed then, answered the boy, shrinking from Catherine's salute, and he put his fingers to his eyes to remove incipient tears. Come, come, there's a good child, I whispered, leading him in. You'll make her weep too. See how sorry she is for you. I do not know whether it was sorry for him, but his cousin put on as sad a countenance as himself and returned to her father. All three entered and mounted to the library, where tea was laid ready. I proceeded to remove Linton's cap and mantle, and placed him on a chair by the table, but he was no sooner seated than he began to cry afresh. My master inquired what was the matter. I can't sit on a chair, sobbed the boy. Go to the sofa then, and Ellen shall bring you some tea, answered his uncle patiently. He had been greatly tired during the journey, I felt convinced, by his fretful, ailing charge. Linton slowly trailed himself off and lay down. Cathy carried a footstool and her cup to his side. At first she sat silent, but that could not last. She had resolved to make a pet of her little cousin, as she would have him to be, and she commenced stroking his curls and kissing his cheek, and offering him tea in her saucer like a baby. This pleased him, for he was not much better. He dried his eyes and lightened into a faint smile. Oh, he'll do very well, said the master to me, after watching them a minute. Very well, if we can keep him, Ellen. The company of a child of his own age will instill new spirit into him soon, and by wishing for strength he'll gain it. Aye, if we can keep him, I mused to myself, and sore misgivings came over me that there was slight hope of that. And then I thought, however will that weakling live at Wuthering Heights? Between his father and Harrington, what playmates and instructors there'll be. Our doubts were presently decided, even earlier than I expected. I had just taken the children upstairs after tea was finished, and seen Linton asleep. He would not suffer me to leave him till that was the case. I had come down and was standing by the table in the hall, lighting a bedroom candle for Mr. Edgar, when a maid stepped out of the kitchen and informed me that Mr. Heathcliff's servant Joseph was at the door and wished to speak with the master. I shall ask him what he wants first, I said, in considerable trepidation. A very unlikely hour to be troubling people, and the instant they have returned from a long journey, I don't think the master can see him. Joseph had advanced through the kitchen as I uttered these words, and now presented himself in the hall. He was donned in his Sunday garments, with his most sanctimonious and sorrowous face, and holding his hat in one hand and his stick in the other, he proceeded to clean his shoes on the mat. Good evening, Joseph, I said coldly. What business brings you here tonight? It's Master Linton I must speak to, he answered, waving me disdainfully aside. Mr. Linton is going to bed, unless you have something particular to say. I'm sure he won't hear it now, I continued. You had better sit down in there and entrust your message to me. Which is his room? Pursued the fellow, surveying the range of closed doors. I perceived he was bent on refusing my mediation so very reluctantly. I went up to the library and announced the unseasonable visitor, advising that he should be dismissed till next day. Mr. Linton had no time to empower me to do so, for Joseph mounted close at my heels and, pushing into the apartment, planted himself at the far side of the table with his two fists clapped on the head of his stick, and began in an elevated tone as if anticipating opposition. "Heathcliff has sent me for his lad, and I mustn't go back without him." Edgar Linton was silent a minute. An expression of exceeding sorrow overcast his features. He would have pitied the child on his own account, but recalling Isabella's hopes and fears and anxious wishes for her son, and her commendations of him to his care, he grieved bitterly at the prospect of yielding him up, and searched in his heart how it might be avoided. No plan offered itself. The very exhibition of any desire to keep him would have rendered the claimant more peremptory. There was nothing left but to resign him. However, he was not going to rouse him from his sleep. "Tell Mr. Heathcliff," he answered calmly, "that his son shall come to Wuthering Heights tomorrow. He is in bed, and too tired to go the distance now. You may also tell him that the mother of Linton desired him to remain under my guardianship, and at present his health is very precarious." "No," said Joseph, giving a thud with his prop on the floor, and assuming an authoritative air. "No, that means naught. Heathcliff makes no count of the mother, nor ye nother, but he'll have his lad, and I must take him, so now you know." "You shall not tonight," answered Linton decisively. "Walk downstairs at once, and repeat to your master what I have said, Ellen. Ellen, show him down. Go." And aiding the indignant elder with a lift by the arm, he rid the room of him and closed the door. "Very well," shouted Joseph, as he slowly drew off. "To morn, he's coming himself, and thrust him out if you dare." To obviate the danger of this threat being fulfilled, Mr. Linton commissioned me to take the boy home early on Catherine's pony, and said he, as "we shall now have no influence over his destiny, good or bad, you must say nothing of where he's gone to my daughter. She cannot associate with him hereafter, and it is better for her to remain in ignorance of his proximity, lest she should be restless and anxious to visit the Heights. Merely tell her his father sent for him suddenly, and he has been obliged to leave us." Linton was very reluctant to be roused from his bed at 5 o'clock, and astonished to be informed that he must prepare for further travel. But I softened off the matter by stating that he was going to spend some time with his father, Mr. Heathcliff, who wished to see him so much. He did not like to defer the pleasure till he should recover from his late journey. "My father?" he cried in strained perplexity. "Mamma never told me I had a father. Where does he live? I'd rather stay with uncle." "He lives a little distance from the Grange," I replied. "Just beyond those hills, not so far. But you may walk over here when you get hearty, and you should be glad to go home and to see him. You must try to love him, as you did your mother, and then he will love you." "But why have I not heard of him before?" asked Linton. "Why didn't Mamma and he live together, as other people do. He had business to keep him in the north, I answered, and your mother's health required her to reside in the south. And why didn't Mama speak to me about him? Preserved the child. She often talked of Uncle, and I learned to love him long ago. How am I to love Papa? I don't know him. Oh, all children love their parents, I said. Your mother perhaps thought you would want to be with him if she mentioned him often to you. Let us make haste. An early ride on such a beautiful morning is much preferable to an hour's more sleep. Is she to go with us? He demanded. The little girl I saw yesterday. Not now, replied I. Is Uncle? He continued. No, I shall be your companion there, I said. Linton sank back on his pillow and fell into a brown study. I won't go without Uncle, he cried at length. I can't tell where you mean to take me. I attempted to persuade him of the naughtiness of showing reluctance to meet his father. Still, he obstinately resisted any progress towards dressing, and I had to call for my master's assistance in coaxing him out of bed. The poor thing was finally got off, with several delusive assurances that his absence should be short, that Mr. Edgar and Cathy would visit him, and other promises equally ill-founded, which I invented and reiterated at intervals throughout the way. The pure heather-scented air, the bright sunshine, and the gentle canter of Minnie relieved his despondency after a while. He began to put questions concerning his new home and its inhabitants with greater interest and liveliness. Is Wuthering Heights as pleasant a place as Thrushcross Grange? He inquired, turning to take a last glance into the valley, whence a light mist mounted and formed a fleecy cloud on the skirts of the blue. It is not so buried in trees, I replied, and it is not quite so large, but you can see the country beautifully all round, and the air is healthier for you, fresher and drier. You will perhaps think the building old and dark at first, though it is a respectable house, the next best in the neighbourhood, and you will have such nice rambles on the moors. Harrington Earnshaw, that is, Miss Cathy's other cousin, and so yours in a manner, will show you all the sweetest spots, and you can bring a book in fine weather and make a green hollow your study, and now and then your uncle may join you in a walk. He does frequently walk out on the hills. And what is my father like? He asked. Is he as young and handsome as Uncle? Join me to find out the answer. Join me in the next video of Wuthering Heights. Join me the next video of Wuthering Heights. Look forward to seeing you then. And by the way, please subscribe to the channel and please share the videos. But join me in the next video of Wuthering Heights. Morel saying, see you then. Bye.